The most powerful creature in the Upside Down, the monster who killed Max Mayfield, who opened 4 gates into Hawkins, who has been terrorizing our heroes since 1983, is terrified of a cave in Nevada. In this video, we're breaking down everything we know about the cave that Vecna won't enter, from what actually happened in Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1, to what the first Shadow Broadway play reveals about Henry Creel's childhood encounter with Dimension X. We're covering his 12-hour disappearance, his first contact with the Mind Flayer, the transformation that gave him powers, and why this memory still fills him with terror decades later. Let's get into it. In Stranger Things Season 5, Episode 4, Max Mayfield discovered that Vecna is terrified of entering a specific cave memory from his childhood, making it the only safe place inside his mindscape prison. After Vecna cursed and killed Max at the end of Season 4, Eleven managed to restart her heart, but Max's consciousness didn't return to her body. Instead, Max found herself trapped inside Vecna's mind, wandering through his memories. She woke up in the Rainbow Room at Hawkins' lab, where Henry Creel massacred the other test subjects. As she tried to escape, she moved through different memories, including Hawkins High School in 1959, where a young Joyce Byers was promoting the school's production of Oklahoma. Max kept moving from memory to memory until she heard Kate Bush's "Running Up That Hill" playing. She followed the music, hoping it would lead her back to the real world, where Lucas was playing the song by her hospital bed. The music led her to the memory of the night Vecna killed her, and she saw a portal showing Lucas sitting beside her comatose body. Max ran toward the portal, so close she could feel Lucas touching her hand. Then the tape ended. The portal closed. Vecna appeared behind her in his Henry Creel form and chased her through his memories. Max ran until she reached a cave system with red rock formations and scorpions scattered around the desert landscape. She ran inside the cave entrance. Vecna stopped at the entrance, refusing to follow her. Max described his expression as terrified, more than scared, genuinely afraid of entering that specific memory, making it her home inside Vecna's mind prison, the one place he couldn't reach her. Vecna controls everything in the Upside Down. He commands demogorgons. He possesses people. He traps consciousness inside his mind. He opened 4 gates into Hawkins and tore the town apart. He killed Max and imprisoned her consciousness. He can appear as Mr. What's-It to manipulate children. He has absolute power over his domain, except for one place, one memory, one cave in Nevada that fills him with fear so intense he won't cross the threshold even when his prisoner is standing right there. Max was feet away from him. He could have grabbed her if he just stepped inside. He didn't. The fact that his Vecna form started showing when he reached toward the cave suggests the memory triggers something deeper than psychological fear. It might be affecting him physically, breaking down whatever control lets him maintain his human appearance. The cave isn't just a bad memory, it's a wound that never healed. Whatever happened to 8-year-old Henry Creel in that Nevada cave was traumatic enough that decades later, after becoming one of the most powerful beings in the Upside Down, after embracing his monstrous identity, after killing dozens of people and opening dimensional rifts, he still can't face it. That level of fear tells us the cave holds the key to understanding Vecna and possibly to destroying him. Don't forget to subscribe and turn your notifications on so you don't miss Volume 2 when we finally learn what happens when Max and Holly try to escape. But to understand why Vecna is terrified of this cave, we need to go back to 1951, when an 8-year-old boy named Henry Creel went exploring near a military base in Nevada. According to Stranger Things, the first Shadow Broadway play, which the Duffer Brothers confirmed is canon, young Henry Creel was accidentally transported to Dimension X for 12 hours through the Nevada cave system, where he first encountered the Mind Flayer. The first Shadow reveals that before the Creel family moved to Hawkins in 1959, they lived in Rachel, Nevada, near a military base in Lincoln County. Dr. Martin Brenner was conducting experiments at this base, attempting to recreate what happened to his father during World War II. Brenner's father had been the captain and sole survivor of the USS Eldridge experiment, where the military accidentally sent their ship to Dimension X while trying to make it invisible. Brenner's father returned with significant injuries and a completely new blood type. Years later, Dr. Brenner established the Nevada experiment to reproduce his father's experience. A Soviet spy working at the military base stole crucial technology from this experiment and hid it in a cave system near Rachel, Nevada. On his 8th birthday, Henry Creel went exploring in these caves while playing with a spyglass. He found the stolen technology and accidentally activated it. The technology transported him to Dimension X. Henry was missing for approximately 12 hours. When he was found outside the cave system, he had a wound on his left hand and no memory of what happened during those missing hours. The Russian spy's body was discovered in the same cave system. After returning from Dimension X, Henry's personality changed dramatically. His parents, Victor and Virginia Creel, noticed the transformation and became frightened of their own son, which eventually prompted them to move the family to Hawkins, hoping for a fresh start. The play makes it clear the Mind Flayer already existed in Dimension X and corrupted Henry during those 12 hours, which undercuts his Season 4 claim that he shaped it. The Mind Flayer possessed him and gave him psychokinetic abilities. Season 5 and The First Shadow line up to show that Max's hideout cave is the same Nevada cave from Henry's childhood, and Volume 2 will reveal more details about what happened there. Henry was 8 years old, a child playing with a spyglass who stumbled on stolen Soviet technology and accidentally activated a dimensional portal. He spent 12 hours in Dimension X with the Mind Flayer, 12 hours of experiencing whatever that entity does to people, 12 hours that he couldn't remember consciously when he came back. The Mind Flayer didn't just give Henry powers, it possessed him, changed his blood type the same way Brenner's father's blood changed after the USS Eldridge incident, transformed him at a fundamental biological level. The play shows Henry struggling against the Mind Flayer's influence throughout his teenage years, trying to resist the darkness, trying to live a normal life with Patty Newby. He fought it. He lost. By the time he murdered his mother and sister in 1959, the Mind Flayer had won. When Eleven sent Vecna to Dimension X in 1979, he claimed he shaped the Mind Flayer, gave it form, controlled it. But The First Shadow reveals that's not the full truth. The Mind Flayer had already possessed Henry decades earlier. Vecna's entire identity as the ruler of the Upside Down might be built on a lie. He might not be in control at all. The Mind Flayer might have been manipulating him since he was 8 years old, since that first encounter in the Nevada cave. The cave represents the moment Henry Creel stopped existing as a normal human child and became a vessel for something ancient and malevolent from Dimension X. That's why he can't enter it. That's why he's terrified, because the cave memory holds the truth about who really controls the Upside Down. Speaking of dimensional breaches and childhood trauma, the theories about what actually happened in that cave get even darker when you consider the possibilities the show hasn't confirmed yet. The Nevada cave may have functioned as a natural thin spot between dimensions, allowing Henry to slip through without fully understanding what was happening to him. Throughout Stranger Things, we've seen that gates to the Upside Down require massive amounts of psychic energy to open. Eleven opened the original gate in 1983 using her powers. The Soviets built an entire facility with massive machines just to force open a gate in Season 3. Vecna needed 4 ritual murders to create permanent rifts in Season 4. But the Nevada cave in 1951 didn't need any of that. The Soviet technology that Henry activated wasn't designed to open gates. It was technology stolen from Brenner's experiment, meant to recreate what happened to the USS Eldridge. Yet it sent Henry to Dimension X anyway. Suggesting something about that specific location made it easier for dimensional barriers to collapse. The cave system in Nevada, near a military base conducting dimensional experiments, could have been weakened by repeated attempts to breach into other dimensions. The thin spot theory would explain why Henry went through so easily, why he was transported without the massive energy requirements we've seen in later seasons, and why the location still holds such significance in his memories. Speculatively, if the cave was a natural thin spot, Henry might not have understood what was happening to him. An 8-year-old child playing with a spyglass wouldn't recognize dimensional barriers weakening. He wouldn't know he was slipping between realities. He'd just know that suddenly, everything changed, that he was somewhere else, somewhere wrong, somewhere dark, and full of something that noticed him. Thin spots in fiction usually work both ways, which raises terrifying possibilities. If Henry could slip through from Earth to Dimension X easily, could things from Dimension X slip through to Earth just as easily? Could the Mind Flayer have been trying to breach through that specific location for years, waiting for someone to open the door from the other side? The fact that Brenner's father ended up in Dimension X during the USS Eldridge experiment, and then years later Brenner conducted experiments in the exact same region, and then Henry ended up there too, feels less like coincidence and more like that specific geographic location has always been vulnerable to dimensional breaching. It can be suggested that Vecna's terror of the cave comes from remembering the moment he realized he'd crossed a boundary he couldn't uncross, that he'd opened a door that couldn't be closed, that he'd invited something into himself that would never leave. And if dimensional barriers were that weak in the Nevada cave, then the rules of reality inside Dimension X might have been just as broken, which brings us to an even stranger mystery about Henry's 12 missing hours. Henry's 12-hour disappearance in Dimension X might have felt much shorter to him, suggesting time operates differently in that dimension and potentially explaining his fragmented memories of the event. The first shadow confirms Henry was missing for 12 hours in the real world. However, the play never specifies how long those 12 hours felt to Henry himself. Throughout Stranger Things, we've seen multiple instances where time behaves strangely in relation to the Upside Down. When Will Byers was trapped in the Upside Down for nearly a week in Season 1, he experienced time normally, but the dimension itself seemed frozen in the moment the gate opened. The Upside Down Hawkins is stuck on November 6, 1983, the day Will was taken. In Season 4, when Nancy entered the Upside Down, she noted that it was frozen on the day Vecna killed the Holloway family. Time in the Upside Down doesn't flow the same way as time in the regular world. Dimension X, which predates the Upside Down and represents the pure version of that alternate dimension before it became a twisted mirror of Hawkins, likely operates on even stranger temporal rules. If time moved differently for Henry, it would explain several mysteries about his experience. The first shadow mentions he returned with no memory of what happened. Complete amnesia about 12 hours of trauma seems unusual even for a terrified child. But if those 12 hours felt like minutes or even seconds to Henry, his brain might not have had time to process and store coherent memories. Alternatively, if time moved slower in Dimension X, what felt like days or weeks of torment to 8-year-old Henry could have been only 12 hours in the real world. That extended subjective experience would explain why the Mind Flayer's possession took hold so completely, why Henry's personality changed so dramatically, why his parents became frightened of him. You can't spend what feels like weeks being broken down by an ancient entity and come back the same person, especially not as a child. The time distortion theory also explains why Vecna can't enter the cave memory. If his subjective experience of those 12 hours was actually much longer or much shorter than it should have been, the memory itself would be fundamentally broken, disconnected from normal temporal flow. Entering that memory might mean experiencing the time distortion again, reliving the moment when reality stopped making sense. For someone who now controls the Upside Down and its frozen-in-time nature, confronting the original source of that temporal wrongness might be genuinely dangerous. If you're wondering whether time distortion alone could explain Henry's transformation, drop a comment with your theory about what the Mind Flayer actually did to him during those missing hours. Henry's encounter with Dimension X particles in the Nevada cave might have fundamentally altered him at a molecular level, giving him powers by absorbing energy directly from the alternate dimension. The first shadow explicitly confirms that Henry returned from Dimension X with a different blood type, the same transformation that happened to Brenner's father after the USS Eldridge incident. This isn't psychological change, this is biological mutation. The Mind Flayer particles that Henry encountered literally changed his blood, transforming him into something other than human. Later, Dr. Brenner used Henry's altered blood to create the other numbered children at Hawkins' lab. 11, 8, and the other test subjects all gained powers because Brenner injected their mothers with drugs derived from Henry's post-Dimension X physiology. Henry's transformation wasn't just about gaining psychokinetic abilities. It was about becoming a bridge between dimensions, a human body infused with Dimension X energy at a cellular level. The absorbed energy theory suggests Henry didn't just encounter the Mind Flayer in that cave, he absorbed part of Dimension X itself into his body. The Mind Flayer particles in his bloodstream represent literal pieces of that alternate dimension, now permanently bonded to his human cells. This would explain why Vecna eventually became so powerful in the Upside Down, after Eleven sent him there in 1979. He wasn't just a psychic human in an alternate dimension. He was a human who already carried Dimension X energy inside him, returning to the source of that energy. It can be suggested that Vecna's fear of the cave memory relates to the absorption process itself. If the transformation happened in that cave, if that's where his human body was first invaded and altered by Dimension X particles, then the memory would contain the exact moment his humanity ended. That kind of trauma, the memory of feeling your own cells change, feeling foreign energy flooding into your bloodstream, feeling yourself stop being entirely human, would leave scars deeper than any psychological wound. Speculatively, entering the cave memory might even risk reversing the transformation. If that's where the absorption began, could returning there undo what the Mind Flayer did? Could it separate the Dimension X energy from Henry's cells? Vecna might be terrified that confronting this memory could strip away his powers, leaving him as the 8-year-old boy who went into the cave, vulnerable and human again. But if Henry absorbed something from Dimension X when he entered that cave, the terrifying question becomes whether something from Dimension X also decided to hitch a ride back with him. Henry's return from Dimension X might have brought more than just himself back through the dimensional barrier, with something dark attached to or following him into the real world. The first shadow shows that after Henry returned from the cave, supernatural events began occurring around him. Animals died mysteriously. His mother Virginia became increasingly paranoid and disturbed. Strange shadows appeared. The Mind Flayer's influence manifested in the real world through Henry's presence, suggesting he brought something back with him, beyond just his changed blood and suppressed memories. By the time the Creel family moved to Hawkins in 1959, the darkness following Henry had grown strong enough that he eventually murdered his mother and sister while possessed by the Mind Flayer's influence. The entity that possessed him in Dimension X didn't stay there. It followed him home. When Will Byers was taken to the Upside Down in 1983, he brought back the Mind Flayer's connection. When he was possessed in Season 2, doctors burned the creature out of him, but the connection never fully disappeared. Will can still sense the Mind Flayer, still feels cold when danger approaches, still has visions of the Upside Down. If Will, who spent a week in the Upside Down, came back with a permanent connection, what came back with Henry after 12 hours in the original source dimension? It's possible to suggest that something followed Henry through the cave portal, a piece of the Mind Flayer that attached itself to him like a psychic parasite. Not just influence or possession in the abstract sense, but an actual fragment of Dimension X consciousness that merged with Henry's mind. This fragment would explain why Henry's personality changed so dramatically, why his parents feared him, why he eventually embraced the darkness rather than fighting it. He wasn't just influenced, he was occupied. Part of him stopped being Henry and became something else. Vecna's terror of the cave might stem from remembering the moment that thing attached itself to him, the moment he stopped being one person and became two consciousnesses, sharing one body. The real Henry Creel might still be trapped somewhere inside Vecna, and the cave memory might be where he's strongest, where he could potentially fight back against the Mind Flayer's control. Which raises the most disturbing question of all. If something did follow Henry back and merge with his consciousness, why can't he remember any of it happening? Henry Creel's lack of memory about his time in Dimension X suggests something happened that his mind either can't or won't process, creating a psychological wound that manifests as terror in the present day. The first shadow confirms that when Dr. Brenner questioned Henry about his disappearance, Henry had no memory of what happened during those 12 hours. He couldn't remember going into Dimension X, couldn't remember encountering the Mind Flayer, couldn't remember how he got the wound on his hand, couldn't remember anything between activating the Soviet technology and waking up outside the cave. This complete amnesia about such a significant traumatic event is consistent with severe psychological trauma, where the mind protects itself by blocking out unbearable experiences. However, throughout the first shadow, Henry experiences visions, nightmares, and compulsions that suggest his subconscious remembers everything his conscious mind has forgotten. He draws the Mind Flayer without knowing what it is. He feels drawn to darkness. He struggles against urges he doesn't understand. The lost memory angle is perhaps the most frightening possibility because it means something happened in that cave so terrible that Henry's 8-year-old mind couldn't hold on to it. When we block out memories, it's usually because processing them would break us. What breaks an 8-year-old child so completely that decades later, even after becoming Vecna, even after embracing monstrosity, even after deliberately murdering dozens of people, he still can't face that memory? It can be suggested that Henry saw something in Dimension X that contradicted everything a child's mind can accept about reality. Maybe he saw the true form of the Mind Flayer before it took shape. Maybe he saw other humans who'd been trapped in Dimension X, transformed into something unrecognizable. Maybe he saw his own future, saw what he would become, saw Vecna reflected back at him from 28 years in the future. Speculatively, the amnesia might not be natural. The Mind Flayer might have deliberately erased Henry's memories to make the possession easier. If Henry couldn't remember being violated, couldn't remember the moment his autonomy was stolen, he couldn't fight back as effectively. The memories might be locked away somewhere in his mind, and entering the cave in his mindscape might unlock them all at once, forcing Vecna to confront every second of his transformation that he's been protected from remembering. That flood of recovered memory could destroy him, which would explain his absolute terror at the prospect. And while Vecna's fear of the cave might seem like his greatest weakness, it might actually reveal that he's not the real villain at all. Everything we know about Vecna's fear of the cave points to a single truth that reframes the entire series. Henry Creel might not be in control. The canonically confirmed facts from Season 5, Volume 1 and the first Shadow play establish that 8-year-old Henry went into a Nevada cave and accidentally traveled to Dimension X for 12 hours. During that time, the Mind Flayer possessed him, changed his blood type, and transformed him from a normal child into something other than human. He returned with no memory of what happened, but with psychokinetic powers and a fundamentally altered personality. His parents feared him. He fought against the darkness. He lost. And decades later, even as Vecna, even as the apparent ruler of the Upside Down, he's still terrified of the cave where it all began. Max discovered this weakness by accident when Vecna chased her through his memories. She ran into the cave and watched him stop at the entrance, too afraid to follow, his Vecna form breaking through his human disguise as he reached toward her. She made it her sanctuary because she recognized his fear as genuine. Whatever happened in that cave was traumatic enough that Vecna, who has killed dozens of people, who tore Hawkins apart, who trapped children in his mind, who commands armies of demogorgons, still can't face it. The speculative theories about what happened in the cave, the thin spot between dimensions, the time distortion that might have made 12 hours feel like minutes or weeks, the absorption of Dimension X energy into his cells, something dark following him back through the portal, the lost memories his mind can't or won't access, all point toward the cave representing the death of Henry Creel's humanity and the birth of something else. But the first Shadow reveals the crucial detail that changes everything about Vecna's role in Stranger Things. Henry didn't create the Mind Flayer. The Mind Flayer existed first. Henry encountered it in Dimension X and was possessed by it. When Vecna later told Eleven that he shaped the Mind Flayer, gave it form, controlled it, he was either lying or he genuinely doesn't remember the truth. The Mind Flayer shaped him. The Mind Flayer gave him form. The Mind Flayer might still be in control. This reframes every action Vecna has taken throughout the series. Opening the gates to Hawkins, possessing Will Byers, creating the Flesh Monster in Season 3, killing teenagers to open more gates in Season 4. Vecna reveals in Volume 1 that he needs 12 children as perfect vessels to reshape the world, and the episodes already show him actively kidnapping kids to fulfill that plan. Are these Vecna's plans, or the Mind Flayer's? Is Vecna executing his own strategy for reshaping the world? Or is he a puppet carrying out the Mind Flayer's agenda while believing himself to be in charge? The cave memory holds the answer. That's why Vecna won't enter it. Not just because the memory is traumatic, though it certainly is, but because the cave might force him to confront the truth about who's really controlling the Upside Down. If Vecna enters that memory, he might remember being possessed. He might remember the moment his autonomy was stolen. He might remember that everything he thinks he chose was actually chosen for him by something older and more powerful than he ever was. Max and Holly being trapped in his mindscape with access to that cave memory means they have potential access to the one thing that could break Vecna's control. If they can somehow make him confront what happened in that cave, if they can force him to remember being 8 years old and helpless as the Mind Flayer invaded his mind, they might be able to separate him from the entity that's been controlling him since 1951. But that raises another terrifying possibility. If Vecna isn't really in control, if the Mind Flayer has been manipulating him for 36 years by the time Season 5 takes place, then defeating Vecna might not be enough. The real enemy might be something our heroes haven't fully understood yet. Something that's been pulling strings from Dimension X since before Eleven was born, since before Hawkins' lab existed, since before the Upside Down took shape as a mirror of our world. The cave doesn't just represent Vecna's fear. It represents the origin point of the entire conflict between dimensions. Whatever happened there started everything, and Volume 2 will finally show us what 8-year-old Henry Creel experienced during those 12 missing hours that changed him forever. The question isn't just what Vecna is afraid of in that cave. The question is whether confronting that fear will save him or destroy him, and whether destroying him will end the threat or just reveal an even bigger one. If you want to know what happens when Max and Holly try to use the cave to escape Vecna's mind, and whether Volume 2 finally reveals what happened during those 12 hours in Dimension X, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our breakdown the moment Volume 2 drops on December 25th.